Hello, I'm going to discuss the presidential election in 1984, which was Reagan versus Mondale. One reason why I'm making this video is that this is an election year and many astrologers are going to be making predictions about who is going to win. I've already made one video on Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton as the nominee for the Democratic Party. So other astrologers will be making predictions and analyses of what's going on politically in the United States. And one thing that's very important for anybody doing any kind of prediction in a particular area is to go back and see if your predictive methods work on earlier cases. And we want to test our ideas on previous elections, to put it very simply. And one election that's really interesting to study is 1984, because it was one of the most extreme landslide victories in recent times. Reagan defeated Mondale big time. The electoral vote was 525 to 13. Reagan won 49 states. Mondale won only one state, the state that he's from, and Washington, D.C. Mondale did get 41% of the vote. But he lost in every state except one, and in Washington, D.C. It is considered to be a landslide victory for Reagan. So this is a good one to study to see if our analysis shows that Mondale would get outrageously defeated. And I think at the outset of the campaign that wasn't obvious. As things developed, and then election day finally came, it was a landslide victory for Reagan. Now, we have AA accuracy for Mondale. It means we have a birth time from a birth certificate or birth record. And for Reagan, we don't have much of an idea at all of when he was born. So we're really kind of stuck just looking at Mondale's chart. So let's study Mondale to see what went wrong for him. Why did he do so badly in this election? And let's start off doing the thing that many astrologers do, which is to look at the 5 major aspects of the outer planets to his chart. And I've set the orbs to 3 degrees, 3-degree orb for all the aspects except 2 degrees for sextiles. I think this is fairly in line with what a lot of astrologers do. Many astrologers use small orbs. Some only use a 1-degree orb, often smaller than they're usually used. So I'm going to do something that I think represents something close to what most astrologers do. And let's see how it works out. So here's Walter Mondale's chart, and here is the forecast for 1984. This is one of the ones I'm going to show you later. Let me right-click on this and set this to Jupiter through Pluto, major aspects. And I think I've already customized this. If I scroll down, yes, 3-degree orb for all the 4 aspects and 2-degree orb for the sextile. So conjunction, opposition, square and trine have 3-degree orbs. Sextile is a 2-degree orb. And there it is. It's a fairly small list of influences over the year 1984. That's from January to December, the entire year, 1984. And the election happens in early November, so we can see everything building up. And do we see, based on transits, the big failure, that big loss that Mondale experiences? We see transits like this. Transiting Jupiter conjunct his Sun, exact on November 18th, a little bit after the election. No dates here means that it did not become exact. Jupiter was conjunct his Mercury. So Mondale has a Sun-Mercury conjunction in his chart. This Mercury at 12 degrees, Sun at 14 degrees, and transiting Jupiter is right there. Not quite exact to his Sun, but exact to his Mercury. So that should be good. Jupiter on his Mercury and close to his Sun should be very good. And sextile his ascendant. So going back to his chart, his ascendant at 6 Pisces, so Jupiter must have been right over here between 6 and 12 Capricorn, and we can look at a bi-wheel of that to see it. In fact, let's do it. Let's look at the bi-wheel. Let's go over here to multi-wheels. I'm in the Series 2.0 software. Let's go to the natal transit, animation and adjust, which brings up a nice bi-wheel that we can look at. I'm going to change the style here to a style that many astrologers use, which would be equally spaced. I think that's a little simpler for most astrologers to, when looking at transits to natal. And let's change the date to, let's put it in the middle of the of 1984, July 1st, 1984. Apply date. And there's that Jupiter at 7 Capricorn, close to his Mercury, sextile his ascendant. And what's happening is Saturn, we'll go back to that timeline format forecast, Saturn at 9 Scorpio is trine his ascendant. So you have Saturn trine the ascendant at 9 Scorpio, Jupiter sextile the ascendant, so Jupiter and Saturn are roughly sextiled, with Saturn trine the ascendant, Jupiter sextile the ascendant, and his Mercury here at 12. So if we go a month earlier, if I go 1 month earlier, we'll see the planets move around. Jupiter is up a little bit earlier, almost on Mercury. So they're moving around. We can go through the whole year and see everything that happens here. If I go all the way back to May, Jupiter's almost on Mercury. Saturn's at 13, close to sextiling Mercury. So they hang around there most of the year. Let's jump forward, for example, I'll jump forward 5 months from, I'm on May 1st. Tells me up here now, October 1st. As we head in towards the election, Jupiter has moved back to 4 Capricorn, retrograded back. Saturn at 14 has moved a little bit forward. So they're right in that range. Rough area of being either sextile to Mercury or the Sun for Saturn, and trine the ascendant. So they're right in that range of when they move back to around 6 degrees, they aspect the ascendant. When they move up to about 12 to 14 degrees, they aspect Mercury and Sun. So very good. When we look at it in the timeline format, we see these aspects: Saturn sextiling, transiting Saturn sextile the Mercury in May and September. Saturn sextile the Sun, we see that April 19th, September 28th. So a lot of positive things going on. Why did Mondale do so poorly? So I summarize here: the Saturn is sextile Sun and Mercury, Jupiter is sextile the ascendant, Sun and Mercury, and conjunct Sun and Mercury, I mean. Overall, the transits look positive. Why did Mondale, got some typos here, do so badly? Maybe we need to look at progressions, solar arc directions, maybe solar returns. There's a lot of different techniques. I think what's really important is if you hunt around enough, you're going to find something among all the ideas that you believe in that will support your theory. But ahead of time, before the results, can you predict what will happen? And I'm going to share with you some of the forecasting methods that I use, is that I look at composite conjunctions and oppositions. This is with transits especially. I look at the transiting planet conjunctions and oppositions. I look at same phase angles. I also look at midpoint to midpoint, which is not as important as these two. And I look at aspects to major patterns in the person's chart. And I discuss these also in some other videos that you can watch to get a better idea of this. And I'll put a link here to one of those videos so you can go back and get an idea of what that is if you're not familiar with it. So now, if we look at the composite, the same phase angle and midpoint to midpoint, let's see what we get. So going back to the Sirius software, I'm going to right click and I'm going to change this to, instead of major aspects, I just click over here and I'll select midpoints, composite, midpoint, midpoint, same angle, and let's see what I get. Do I see something that would indicate a big success, like a Jupiter-Uranus? No, I don't. I still have my other aspects here, the Jupiter sextile ascendant, the Saturn sextile Sun, Jupiter conjunct Mercury, Saturn sextile Mercury. Notice this one, Jupiter conjunct the Sun a little bit after the election. So again, I'm not seeing it. This Neptune to Uranus doesn't look nice, but it's outer to outer. It's outer transits to inner planets that most astrologers say are more important. There's this Uranus-Pluto midpoint thing, which is one of the things I look at. It's not particularly wonderful. So I still don't see why did Mondale do so badly. Well, the next thing that I look at is for presidential elections in the United States especially, which are ones I've studied the most. I look at harmonics 8, 11, 13, and 9. I look at the candidate harmonic chart. So I'm going to look at Mondale's 8th harmonic, because that'll tell me about his basic motivation and drive. I'm going to look at his 11th harmonic, because I've noticed that many recent presidents have very strong 11th harmonic, especially with the planet Jupiter involved in a major pattern. It's big dreams and visions, and the sense of American influence spreading around the world. It's dynamic, it's impatient, it's restless. So this is often very strong, I've noticed, in charts of presidents. I think it has to do with American expansionism and optimism and impatience to make things bigger quick. So the 11th and 13th harmonic is sometimes emphasized. 13th harmonic gives a sense of personal power, the ability to command things. And the 9th harmonic shows up especially for Democrats with the emphasis on community service, strong communities, and interdependence. And this interdependence in the 9th harmonic is the thing that the Republicans are sometimes very skeptical of, because in interdependence often meaning that people become dependent and other people taking care of them. And the Democrats tending to be more positive about it, that people don't become dependent and unwilling to take care of themselves, but they all work together to help each other. Those are two potentials of the 9th harmonic. I would say the Democrats tend to see the positive side of 9th harmonic, and Republicans tend to see the negative side. Well, do people tend to mischannel 9th harmonic energy, or do they tend to channel it well? I don't know. Different people have different opinions. But for Democrats, 9th harmonic is often important. So when we look at these charts for Mondale, what we'll see is in the 9th harmonic, he has Sun conjunct Moon square Saturn. So I didn't select it yet. So let's go over here to harmonic charts, and I'll select 9 and 11. And here is Mondale's 9th harmonic chart, Sun conjunct Moon. We allow a 16-degree orb, as I explained in the videos on interpreting harmonic charts. This is a 5-degree orb, very definitely there. Whatever the Sun and Moon do in your chart is extremely important, obviously. We often call them the two lights of the chart, and they're a 9th harmonic, classic for a Democrat, leading politician. And the Sun is square Saturn. It's actually a 1/12, a semi-sextile in the natal chart. Shows up here in the 9th harmonic as Saturn square the Sun. So this is a big part of Walter Mondale's personality. And the reason why he's a politician is that he's a Democrat politician trying to be responsible, trying to bring benefit to the working people and the regular people. So these slogans, these things that the politicians say, they almost always really mean it. They don't just make this stuff up as an image just to get elected. Walter Mondale really believes in his responsibility to help the common person and to build proper health care, proper education, to nurture and support the families and communities. A big reason why he's in politics. If this gets activated leading up to the election, then this becomes a very strong point for him. Now that is something we would expect. This one in the 11th harmonic is more surprising. This is not something we usually think of with Walter Mondale. And this is one of the things about astrology. If astrology only confirms what we already know, what's the point of it? Here we learn something new about Mondale. He's really an innovator. He's really believes in freedom. he has a Uranus, Pluto, Mercury, mean in the 11th harmonic, means he's an innovative thinker. And his sun comes in with these dashed lines in the 11th harmonic, means he's a bit of a radical, actually. He's a reformer. He's an innovator. He says he grew up in Minnesota in a very conservative environment, and what does he do? He becomes a bit radical. He wants to upset things. He becomes very actively involved in equal rights and programs for the disadvantaged people. So he's trying to reform the way things are. So he's a little bit more of a reform spirit than we normally recognize. Now, he writes a biography later in life, which brings out many of his qualities, and people love his biography. Got a lot of positive reviews for his sincerity, his honesty, and the dynamic action that he took. And I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. So this is a little surprising. I didn't expect him to be have as much reform spirit. He seems always a little more laid back and more middle of the road, but he is a person who wants to really make change. So these are two driving forces that led him to be vice president of the United States, to run for president. He failed miserably in the election, but how many of us become vice president of the United States? He rose to the top through his sincere and honest concern for communities and his desire to make change. Sun, Mercury, Uranus, Pluto. So, if these get activated during the year 1984, leading up to the election in November, it's going to bring out these aspects of himself. Now, here's the key to winning an election from an astrological viewpoint. What you want to do: number one, clearly state and impress upon the public the message that is in your chart. So Mondale needs to make it clear that he's going to meet the responsibilities of people, trying to pay their bills, trying to educate their children, trying to meet their health issues. And if that gets activated, that Sun-Moon conjunction, square Saturn in his 9th harmonic, if that gets activated, whatever planet activates it and the way it activates it, he needs to get that, he needs to feel that and get that message out there. Number two, keep in mind that the winner is not fatalistically written in the stars. So this idea that Mondale, if he has all these trines and sextiles to his ascendant and his Sun and Mercury, he's got great aspects, he'll win. It does not really work that way, in my opinion. What happens is, if that was true, there would be no reason for the candidates to go out and campaign. They should all just stay home and let the destiny of the stars unfold, if the stars are that powerful. What you need to do is you need to communicate your message and get people inspired about it. And the reason Mondale lost the election is he did not communicate very well the message that's in his birth chart. And he didn't communicate how it was activated leading up to the election to some extent. He didn't communicate that. He felt it, he experienced it, but he did not communicate it. So what a candidate has to do is they have to communicate who they are, and they have to inspire others about it. That's the name of the game. You have to be genuine. You have to win, that honesty, that something in you being expressed, people feel the power of it. They feel that it's you. And if they can identify with it, they will join with you. So that's the key. And every politician, just like every other person on the planet, has their own unique energy flow and their own unique thing to bring to the table. They need to find what it is. It's written in their birth chart, communicate it, express it, and get people inspired and excited about it. So to summarize, you've got to communicate and inspire. So what the astrology does is it does not tell us directly who will win, but it will tell us how they will win if they win. It will tell us what the theme is. It'll tell us what the style is, what their message is, and what their challenge is, and we can advise them on what to do. We can see the likely winner based on what's appropriate and what fits in historically, what people are excited about, and we can see what the dynamics are, and it helps us predict the winner. But who wins is going to depend on who, you might say, plays the game the best way. And I don't mean game in a cynical or critical way, but who is able to master their energy. So Mondale has a sincere interest in building community and helping the common man and woman. Like most Democrats, he has a strong ninth harmonic pattern. In his case, it's a Sun conjunct Moon square Saturn, with especially Sun square Saturn. It's Saturnian. So we are not surprised that he failed to put sufficient energy and enthusiasm into this message. I watched one of his ads about the common man, and it wasn't that exciting. It just said, oh, those Republicans, they just want to take your money. You're a common man, and it shows the working man with the helmet on because he's doing construction work or something. Very plain, sort of boring. He could have gotten more into the heart of what it's like for somebody to get injured, your child to get sick or be in an accident, the needs of people. He should have gotten more emotional. He should have gotten deeper about it, because that's what he is, and he doesn't bring it out. So he's not good at communicating what's in his heart and what's motivating him. And I mentioned before, his biography, on the other hand, got very high praise. In his book, he expresses this stuff, and people, were impressed about his sincerity. But he didn't get it across in the campaign. Now, let's look at what happened leading up to the campaign. Go back to his natal chart, go back to the timeline, and I'll right click here, and I set up a transit forecast for Mondale for his 11th harmonic and his 9th harmonic. So I'll go into the customize, and what I did is I took the Sun, Moon, and Saturn. Why Sun and Moon, Saturn? Because those are the three planets in his 9th harmonic pattern, the Sun conjunct Moon square Saturn. Then I take, if any of these planets are slow, I put them in here, Saturn, and I always put Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. Because from the research, and it makes theoretical sense, that Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, they're slow, outer moving planets. Saturn's not always good, Pluto's not always good, but Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune tend to bring the pattern to life. Neptune often has a negative reputation, you might say, in astrology, but it's very good in these transits. So Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, in this case Saturn, because it's one of the natal planets. And if we look at the aspects, I've always put in conjunction, opposition, and square. And I put the 9, 18, 27, 36. That's 9, 9 times 2, 9 times 3, 9 times 4. And the higher harmonics get smaller orbs. So I give a 1 degree orb for 9 and 18, and then proportionally smaller 27 gets a 45-minute orb, and the 36 harmonic gets a half a degree orb. Higher harmonics have to have smaller orbs. And there it is. We're going to see if his Sun, Moon, Saturn gets activated. We click OK. This is very exciting to me. We'll see if Mondale's community orientation gets activated, and it did. And this is a big reason why he was in the election and why he got selected as the candidate to be the Democrat. He beat out the competitors. He was running against Gary Hart and several other people, Jesse Jackson, John Glenn, all these different candidates. He wins, and he had Neptune aspecting his Sun in 27th for the whole first half of the year, and his Moon, because the Sun and Moon are involved in this pattern. And there's the Moon, and in fact it's beautiful because the Moon in January, February, and then again in June, and in between that to the Sun. So it's really fantastic the way, because this would mean, what does it mean? It means with Neptune in 27, which is 9 times 3, it means an emphasis on The idealism, the vision, it's very idealistic about community, and he didn't communicate that. Reagan was able to paint Mondale as one of these liberal Democrats who just spends money, just spend money, spend money, spend money, just try to help everybody, indulge everybody, and he didn't get across the dream, the vision that we're all one. Jesse Jackson, as an African American, he talks about the rainbow, of everybody being together. Mondale should have joined together with that emphasis. This idealism, and at the same time not identify himself with a kind of hippie, sloppy, druggy kind of thing, but something clean, positive, constructive, but idealistic, to pull together people of different religions or not even religious, just on their humanity. He didn't get that vision, that dream across. He's too quiet, he's too subdued. That Saturn square his Sun Moon held him back. So this is how we do the astrological analysis. We see what the patterns are, we see what was activating, we see what the potential is, and we see whether the person is channeling that energy. Are they expressing it? Are they bringing it out? And it's pretty clear to me that Mondale did not bring it out. I could see why he was in the position. He's got it in his natal chart. He had it activated. It helped elevate him to that situation, but he didn't use the right strategy. He didn't express these things. The main strategy is to be yourself and to get this out. So this is not good for Mondale in terms of him not taking advantage of the opportunity. Heading up closer to the election, he had Jupiter activating his Sun, Moon, Saturn in August, September. This should have been a time, Jupiter, the benefits, the economic growth, and so on. And he had every opportunity. He, at one point, said, I will raise taxes to bring down the deficit. And Reagan said, you're a tax and spend Democrat. Meanwhile, Reagan had raised taxes. He did it very quietly, but he knew that the deficit has to be taken care of. So Mondale just didn't get the message out there and communicate and inspire people about it. So we see the dynamics and we see what went wrong with Mondale. So I've covered all this. Now Mondale's 11th harmonic. Let's go back to the series software. I'm going to right click. I set up an 11th harmonic. Walter Mondale 11th harmonic. And here we've got Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, because Pluto is one of the planets in his 11th harmonic. He has Sun, Mercury, Uranus, and Pluto. You might remember those are the 4 planets in the 11th harmonic pattern. And so we look at 11, 22, and 44 with the smaller orbs for the higher harmonics. And let's see what happens in the 11th. Now this is amazing. Uranus was in 11th to his Sun in January, June, and right before the election, and in orb during the election. That is revolutionary. That is making changes. And he's got some other aspects going on, but I think that's the most significant. Outer planet to inner planet. Whenever Uranus is in 11th, 11 is a little unstable, Uranus is a little unstable. This is very dynamic. So what he would need to do is come across as a person of change, that we're going to change these old ways. We're going to do something dynamic without seeing. He doesn't want to sound like he's like a madman, and he's going to create instability. But this, you can't hide who you are. You have to communicate who you are, what you want to do, and where you want to go. He just doesn't communicate this stuff. It wasn't clear that he was a revolutionary. Look what he did for picking his vice presidential candidate. He picks a woman. Now, we have a woman, Hillary Clinton, running for president this year in 2016. It's not nearly as radical in the year 2016 as it was in 1984. And later on, we find out that he was intent on having either a woman, an African American, something not the usual, white male sort of thing. He's going to upset the apple cart. He's going to have somebody more representative of our nation. He does have a revolutionary streak, but he didn't express it all the time. So when he picks Geraldine Ferraro as his vice president, it is almost a bit of a surprise. Here's this Midwestern guy, calm, collected Midwestern guy, and he does this kind of radical thing. You wonder if he was pressured by his advisors. No, it was from him. He wants to make change. He's a person. He's an agent of change, no matter how mild-mannered he looks. But he didn't convey it. He didn't get it across. We didn't get the full package. So a presidential candidate needs to have a clear image of who they are, express it, and inspire people. And he didn't convey this. It's true, but he didn't convey it. And then it comes out in these behaviors that we don't expect. And plus, Geraldine Ferraro was, fit his goals because she was a woman, but she had some questions about her financial honesty and her husband's financial honesty. She was on the defensive. He didn't pick a person who was a community activist, who had some revolutionary, innovative ideas, who was dedicated to the needs of people in the same way he was. He didn't find a person who was in sync with him. As opposed to Obama and Biden, when we looked at their charts, which I presented in another video, they are in sync, very much. But, she didn't represent the same values and orientation to politics as he does. Now, I haven't looked at her chart, but as a candidate, she doesn't communicate these things that are important to Mondale. He doesn't even communicate them very clearly and very well, and he allows himself to get labeled as just a liberal Democrat who just wants to help everybody out and spend money to solve any problem. But he's much more than that. He didn't communicate it well. He communicates it much better in his biography, much later in life, but he didn't communicate it well. Okay, so here, if you want to stop the video and read this, I've already discussed all this. And one thing I want to mention that's interesting also is that if we go back here and go back to the Jupiter through Pluto with midpoints, etc., one of the things that went on here was this Uranus-Pluto to Uranus-Pluto midpoint opposition, transiting Uranus-Pluto midpoint opposition, natal Uranus-Pluto midpoint. A little bit of that early in the year. Didn't become exact. I know that because there's no date. But it was in orb during the election in early November, became exact on November 19th. That would have been a little bit of this revolutionary spirit getting into orb again right at election time, if he would have expressed more of that Uranus-Pluto to let people know that he's making changes. It's not going to be life as usual. That should have been his message. This isn't going to be the same old, same old. We're going to make some changes, and this is why they're going to be good. And this is, he should have been feistier. Also positive and upbeat. He needed to be a little more radical, a little more vibrant, a little more upfront about these changes and think through exactly what they would be and who would implement them and why they would be better. But he didn't do it. He didn't communicate well. He didn't inspire. So here are some quotes that I found online about how Mondale was more than a landslide loss. A lot of times when we think of Walter Mondale, what we think of is, he's the guy who got beat terribly by Reagan in 1984. He's kind of a side note. He's not a name that comes to mind in presidential politics. But here's a quote from a website. I've got the website here if you want to go to that site and read the whole thing. But I'll read this quickly. Mondale would go on to contribute significantly to some of the nation's most controversial and crucial issues. This is 11th harmonic, Sun, Mercury, Uranus, Pluto, and crucial issues during his 12 years in the Senate. He did so immediately with regard to the period's pressing civil rights issues, helping gain support for the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Now, nowadays, it's 2016, this may not seem so radical. But back in those days, this was radical. These were high stress areas. 1968 Fair Housing Act. Fair housing. This is a Saturn, Sun, Moon. This is not just somebody indulging the poor. This is somebody saying somebody needs to have a decent place to live. Somebody needs to not be criticized, held back because of the color of their skin. These are deep, serious commitments. He's really a person with some the Saturn hitting the Sun, Moon, and a bit of radical intensity. It didn't come out in his personality. It didn't come out when he ran for election, but some of the history of what he did reflects this. Finally outlawed housing discrimination after Congress had tried and failed to do so during 2 prior sessions. He was named chair of the Senate Subcommittee on Children and Youth, Equal Education Opportunity, a vital new federal initiative that he championed special education, bilingual instruction, comprehensive child care. Now, to some people, they may just think liberal democratic programs, but you have to get inside the head of the person, so to speak, and you can do that with astrology, that from his point of view, he's meeting the real needs of people to strengthen their families, give them proper health care, proper education, and make some radical revolutionary changes to bring that into our lives. And he's one of the people who did it. Without Mondale, it would have taken a lot longer. Now, this is interesting. I always thought of Mondale as a sort of quiet. I didn't know what to think of him. I'm not, a political fanatic. I don't follow politics that closely, but just my image. I didn't know he was so innovative. They use the word innovations, which is what we expect from that Sun, Mercury, Uranus, Pluto in the 11th harmonic. Here's a quote from this website at HuffingtonPost.com. Carter and Mondale, so Mondale was the vice president to President Carter. Carter and Mondale changed the vice presidency from a limited institution which provided a presidential successor and did some work episodically in the executive branch into an integral part of the president's inner circle on an ongoing basis. So Mondale, with that 11th harmonic, he's not going to sit around. This guy is not going to sit on his chair and watch the sports game and be a successor if the president dies. Whereas Mondale's predecessors had thought vice presidential influence depended on owning some issue or program, Mondale reached the counterintuitive but wise conclusion that less turf could produce more power. Mondale understood that the vice presidency could be significant if it added value rather than assumed redundant roles. So, Mondale became a senior presidential advisor, a troubleshooter. So he gets involved in things that the president's not doing. It's much more efficient. He's active. He's engaged. He can't sit around. He's an activist. He is almost a revolutionary. I mean, he wants to make change, and he did it. So some things that I didn't know about Mondale, I don't think of him that way. He seems mild-mannered. He seems rather, kind of slow. But you can get deceived by the exterior personality of people. Anyway, some more information about him. That when Carter and Mondale left, and George Bush became the new vice president, Mondale passed on to the Reagan and Bush president, vice president, some of the secrets, some of the things that they were doing as positive changes, and passed that on. So that legacy, the things that Mondale innovated as vice president, were passed on to the Reagan-Bush team who followed him. So he was an innovator, and he helped pass on some of his innovations to the next president, vice president. So conclusions. Picking a campaign strategy is relatively easy using this method of astrological analysis. We can see what the burning issues for the political candidate is, in this case Walter Mondale. We can see what's getting activated leading up to the campaign. We can determine whether a candidate is successfully executing the plan. So we can see what's going on. It's difficult to quantify and measure this. But we can still see what's going on. So we can't reduce this to numbers and prove or disprove, and you might be impressed by this presentation, or you might think it's silly, ridiculous astrology. Whatever you want to think about it, that's one of the consequences of qualitative studies. We also conduct quantitative studies that are more rigorous and more well-defined and less gray area. They're more black and white in the results that we're getting. But this kind of study of politicians and how the astrology operates for them is more of a qualitative study where we see what's in the charts, we see what's getting activated, we see the kind of behavior that's going to lead to success. And what I have in the bottom paragraph here is that Mondale failed to communicate who he is. If you do not communicate, you cannot inspire. So this was one of the biggest landslide victories in recent times. And we're not surprised, given the way the campaign was conducted. His choice of Geraldine Ferraro only symbolically communicated his reformed spirit. She did not bring the vision of dynamic change and progressive energy, inventiveness, and innovation, and she did not even bring the simple and sincere concern for others that were Mondale's strengths. Maybe she would have if she wasn't defending herself so much against some of the allegations. But it didn't happen. For whatever reason, it didn't evolve the way that it should have. So we can see, using the astrology, what the path is, what needs to be communicated, what's in the heart, what needs to be brought to the people so they understand it and they get inspired by it, inspired enough to elect you to do it. And none of that happened. If you don't do it, you're almost guaranteed to lose. If you do it, if you communicate and you inspire others, still doesn't guarantee you're going to win, because your message may not be the one that the people want. They may say, "Oh, that's great that you're into that, but I'm not going there. I'm not with you on this." So you have to be able to have something sincere and real. Mondale does. In fact, I've seen every candidate I've studied does. I think that's why they reach the top of the political system. But they don't always communicate it well, and they don't always inspire people. So you need three things. Four things. One, you have to have something that's appropriate to be in that position. Number two, you've got to communicate it. Number three, beyond communicating, you have to inspire people. And number four, it has to be the right message at the right time that people are ready for. I might be inspired, or you might be inspired about something and communicate it very well, but people just don't agree about that. So if you have all four of those lined up, you have all your ducks in a row, you're going to win. Because unlikely the other candidate will have all those things working for him or her. Okay, so that's it, my friends. What I've tried to do here is give you a realistic sense of how you can really forecast in astrology. Not just say, oh, this transit is a trine or a sextile, or this progressed, Jupiter's on his sun or something like this, therefore he's going to win. I think what we're really looking at is, number one, what techniques really work. And I think that these aspects in the composite chart and same phase angles are far more powerful than the synastry aspects. So I think there's issues of technique and issues of understanding how we really make a forecast. It's not that fatalistic. We need to see what the message in the stars is and whether people are in tune with that message. That's the key. So we have to combine the astrology with an analysis of what's going on, because it's not written in the stars who is going to become president. It is written in the stars who will become president if you make the right steps and take the right action at the right time, to win. Then we can see the result. But you've got to combine the astrology with what people do with it. And that's not an excuse, because it's fairly clear whether someone is fully expressing what's in them, and whether they're being honest and straightforward about it, and able to get people excited about it. Last thing I want to say is that I've done some videos on rock stars, and these rock stars have typically Venus, Uranus, Pluto, and 11th harmonic patterns. They have the rock star power in their charts. They express it. They communicate it. They get people inspired about it, and people join in, you might say, and become fans and get very excited. That same process of having something in the astrology chart that you are in tune with and that you focus on, you don't get distracted from it, and you immerse your attention into that and develop that, and then people connect with it. The same thing that makes a rock star is the same thing that makes a great politician. Different energy flow, different energy dynamics, different planets, different harmonics, but the same thing is required to succeed, which is to get in tune with what your chart says, communicate it, express it, and get people inspired about it. Okay, that's it, my friends. I've got a link here to our software company that makes the Series 2.0 software, a link to the YouTube page, and a link to 4 other astrology websites that I'm involved with. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.